Lesson 4.1, Graphing Equations in Slope-Intercept Form. Our essential question is, how do you graph an equation that is written in slope-intercept form? Slope-intercept form we've worked with previously in Chapter 3. The only thing that's going to look a little bit different in Chapter 4 is we aren't going to write our slope-intercept form in function notation. We're going to write it in terms of x and y, where x is our independent variable and y is our dependent variable. M still represents the slope of the line, and B represents our y-intercept, or where the graph crosses the y-axis. Remember that the y-axis is vertical. So we're going to be given an equation. We're going to take the equation and draw a graph. So I'm going to start out with my slope-intercept form, and I'm going to identify the slope and the intercept. The slope in this equation is 1/2 because the slope is in front of x. It's the coefficient for the variable x. And then the intercept is -4 because that's the number that we see after x. To graph this, I need to graph the intercept first. So the y-intercept is -4. That would be down 4 from the origin on the y-axis. Then, after that, I'm going to use the slope. So I'm going to use the slope to find 2 more points on the line. Okay, the slope is 1/2. So a slope of 1/2 means I rise 1, run 2. So when the rise is a positive one, I'm going to go up 1. So rise 1, run 2, rise 1, run 2. Now I have 3 points on my line, and I can draw the line. Next example, slope-intercept form again. My slope is -2. My intercept is 5. So I'll graph the intercept first again. This intercept is +5. Then for this slope, because it isn't written as a fraction, I'm going to make it a fraction by putting a 1 under it. So my rise is -2, and my run is 1. So a rise of -2 means that I need to go down 2, and then over 1. Down 2 over 1. I always use that negative sign on the top number. So my rise, the rise on this one went down, the run went to the right. I always run to the right because the bottom number is always positive. So moving to the right would be the positive direction. Okay, our next equation, it says write the equation. So our next problem says write the equation in slope-intercept form, then graphing. So first, I need to plug in the slope and the intercept. So my slope is 3/4, so I put that in front of the x. My intercept is -2, that goes after the x. So I start at -2 on the y-axis. My slope is 3/4, so rise over run. My rise, I'm going to go up 3 because it's positive, and the run, I always run to the right. So up 3, over 4, to the right. Draw your line. Another one where we need to plug in the slope and intercept to write the equation. So the slope is -2/5. I put that in front of the x. intercept is positive 3. So on this one, my slope, negative 2/5. Rise is negative 2, so I have to go down 2, and the run is 5. So starting at my intercept, positive 3 right here, I'm going to go down 2 and over 5 to the right. Down 2, over 5 to the right. If you run out of room going over to the right, you could always reverse your slope to find a point back to the left that would still be on your line. Okay, now we've got a little bit more work to do. This next one says rewrite the equation in slope-intercept form and then graph. So slope-intercept form means that we have to get the y by itself. So if I draw a train track here, this is a literal equation. So we learned how to do these back in chapter 2. We need to get this letter y by itself. So I am going to subtract 3x on both sides. That will leave 2y equals negative 3x plus 6. Remember, the 6 and the negative 3x are not like terms. So you have to write them side by side. You can't combine them together. And then I divide by 2 on both sides. So I'm dividing everything by 2. So y equals negative 3/2 x plus 3. That's my equation in slope-intercept form. So we went from standard form. This equation was written in standard form. We went from standard form to slope-intercept form because slope-intercept form is usually the easier form to use when you're drawing a graph. So if you rewrite standard form into slope-intercept and then graph it, it's a pretty good skill to have. So I'll start at 3 on my y-axis, and then I need to go down 3 over 2, down 3 over 2 for my slope, negative 3/2, and then draw my line. We learned in a previous chapter how to use standard form to graph by finding the x and y intercepts. So that method would work as well. This is just an alternative way to be able to graph your equation. Instead of finding the x and y intercepts and graphing that way, you can rewrite it into slope-intercept form and graph from slope-intercept form. Another one like that. So I need to get the y by itself again. Subtract 6x on both sides. On this one, make sure you bring down the negative 4y because in front of the 4 was a minus sign. And side by side, negative 4y equals negative 6x plus 12. The 12 is a positive. The minus is on the 6x. And then I need to divide by my negative 4. Divide everything by negative 4. So y equals negative 6 over negative 4. The negatives will cancel out because a negative divided by a negative is a positive, and 6/4 reduces to 3/2. So positive 3/2 x minus 3, because positive 12 divided by negative 4 is negative 3. So I start my graph at negative 3 on the y-axis, and this one I rise 3, so I go up 3 and then over 2. Up 3, over 2. And draw my line. This next one says to rewrite it into slope-intercept form, but this one's already written in slope-intercept form. What I want you to remember is that when part of this equation is missing, you should be able to figure out which part it is. I do not see a letter x at all in this equation. It simply says y equals negative 3. So that negative 3 is not my slope. My slope is 0, 0. And it's my intercept that's negative 3. This equation would be the same as the one that we're given. 0 times x is 0. So you won't see it written there when the slope is 0. You won't see the variable x at all. So the negative 3 is the y-intercept. And then a slope of 0 means that we have a horizontal line. So that is the line that represents the equation y equals negative 3. Every point on this line, every single one of these points has an ordered pair with a y coordinate of -3. Every single point on this line. So that entire line has an equation y equals -3. Similarly, this one is x equals 2. Well, on the x-axis, x equals 2 is right here. So all of the points that have an x value of 2 are on this vertical line. So if your equation starts with y equals a number, just a constant number, that's going to be horizontal. If your equation has x equals just a plain number, that's going to be vertical. So if you're missing a variable in your equation, you can still graph the line, it's just going to be horizontal or vertical. You should be able to write a summary now, answering your essential question, and check with your teacher's homework calendar for your homework.